Media Hot Cold by Marshall McLuhan and his classic work Understanding Media. Now, the distinction between hot and cold media is one of the most argued about and kind of what in many ways confusing and challenging concepts in the study of mediated communication. However, once you get a handle on it, it's very valuable. It's very valuable. So I'm just going to go at it, and I'll try to explain it as best I can, right? And if it's color coded, that means it's a test question of some kind. Um, there is a basic principle that distinguishes a hot medium like radio from a cool one like that of the telephone, or a hot medium like the movie from a cool one like TV. A hot medium is one that extends one single sense in high definition. High definition is the state of being well filled with data. A photograph is visually high definition. So the rub there is that a hot medium extends or pushes or really kind of influences one of your five senses in a very powerful way, right? In a powerful way. And so this idea of high definition or being filled with a lot of data. So if you see a really bright light, that's a hot medium, right? Because it's focusing one sense, right? Reading is is a hot medium because it's really focusing your eyes, whereas speaking would be a cool medium in the sense that you use multiple senses, and the data is kind of spread around. It's eye, it's ear, it's movement, so that has to do with like your body's touch. So I'll continue. A cartoon is low definition simply because very little visual information is provided, right? Think about how you can tell a story just with a black and white cartoon. Um, Compare that to a photograph, which has much more data. So by comparison, a cartoon is cooler, right? Lower in definition than a photograph. Um, Telephone is a cool medium or one of low definition because the ear is given a meager amount of information. And speech is a cool medium of low definition because so little is given and so much has to be filled in by the listener, right? And again, that's the idea that if it's a cooler medium, it's greater in participation because the communicator has to kind of fill in the blanks. There's more to do for the social actor in a cooler medium. In a hotter medium, all you can do is really sit there and let all the information flow over you. Whereas in a cooler medium, you kind of have to come to it. Think of like a baked potato. If it's super hot, you can kind of juggle it. But if it's cool, you can kind of hold it, negotiate it, feel it. And that's the distinction. On the other hand, hot media do not leave so much to be filled in or completed by the audience. Hot media are therefore low in participation, and cool media are high in participation or completion by the audience. So here, I mean, think of the difference between, say, listening to a tune on the radio and playing the piano yourself. I mean, what's hotter and what's cooler, right? Ask yourself what takes more participation. Well, clearly, playing the piano is much more challenging. It takes a lot more participation on the part of the social actor than just merely listening to a song, right? Uh, McLuhan continues, he says, naturally, therefore, a hot medium like radio has very different effects on the user from a cool medium like the telephone, right? That this idea that, if you're just listening to the radio, right, it's only the ear and the data is flowing through the ear, right? Just like reading, the data is flowing through the eye. And the reason that the telephone is cool is because you got to fill in a lot. Whenever you talk, you're listening and you're speaking. So you're kind of visualizing things as well. So it's a lot of different senses, right? One sense in high definition is hot, multiple senses, that's cool. A cool medium like hieroglyphic or ideogrammic written characters has very different effects from the hot and explosive medium of the phonetic alphabet. The alphabet, when pushed to a high degree of abstract visual intensity, became typography. The printed word, with its specialist intensity, burst the bonds of medieval corporate guilds and monasteries, creating extreme individualist patterns of enterprise and monopoly. But the typical reversal occurred when extremes of monopoly brought back the corporation with its impersonal empire over many lives. And so, I mean, I'm not going to say much about this. I wanted to include it. It's just this idea that, the different patterns and shapes of communication alter everything, and including our economy. The hotting up of the medium of writing to repeatable print intensity led to nationalism and the religious wars of the 16th century. And, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent about it, but the idea is the book and writing led to individualism, which led to things like democracy and the republic, and it overthrew the monarchy. So here, this is the payoff in red here. The heavy and unwieldy media such as stone or time binders used for writing, they are very cool indeed and serve to unify the ages, whereas paper is a hot medium that serves to unify spaces horizontally, both in political and entertainment empires. And so this idea, think of like a gravestone as very personal and participational, super, super cool, right? And what he's doing is he's comparing that to print, which, print we don't have any real relationship with. We you get a newspaper, you throw it away, you get a magazine, right? It's hard to know if people even read books all that much anymore. McLuhan continues, he says, any hot medium allows of less participation than a cool one, as a lecture makes for less participation than a seminar, and a book for less than dialogue. And so that's the rub right there, right? That's the payoff, that like a cool medium includes and a hot medium excludes. You participate with a cool medium. So a lecture is hot because it's just one person to many. And so if you're sitting in a lecture, you don't have anything to do. A seminar only has like 6 or 8 people, so you have to participate. Okay, McLuhan continues. He says, with print, many earlier forms were excluded from life and art, and many were given strange new intensity. But our time is crowded with examples of the principle that the hot form excludes and the cool one includes, right? It's inclusionary because it demands participation. When ballerinas began to dance on their toes a century ago, it was felt that the art of ballet had acquired a new spirituality. With this new intensity, male figures were excluded from ballet. The role of women had also become fragmented with the advent of industrial specialism and the explosion of home functions into laundries, bakeries, and hospitals on the periphery of the community. Intensity or high definition engender specialism and fragmentation in living as in entertainment, which explains why any intense experience must be forgotten, censored, and reduced to a very cool state before it can be learned or assimilated. So let's take that last part first, right? Any intense experience, think of like a car accident, or someone who's exposed to something that would create post-traumatic stress, right? That's what PTSD is in a way. It's too much intensity too fast, and it does something to our psyche, right? Something that's really super hot, and it just overflows us with data in which we have no control, and it just sort of pounds our senses. We have to kind of deconstruct that slowly, and that's why he says, right, any intense experience must be forgotten, censored, and reduced to a very cool state before it can be learned or assimilated, right? Think of like a car accident. So anything that would cause some kind of psychic trauma. And then this idea of intensity or high definition engenders specialism and fragmentation, right? So, like, to deal with experiences that are very hot, right? Super floods of data requires a specialist. And you think of an emergency room doctor who's a specialist, right? Or you could think of like a motorcycle highway patrolman, right? Who has to deal with uh, driving super fast, which is scary enough, and then having to deal with accidents. I mean, that's its own specialism. Think of a pilot, right? All of the influx of data that has to be learned, right? It's super, super hot. A ton of data. And it creates specialisms, and we're not homogenous, right? There are vast differences in expert knowledge. McLuhan continues. He says the new electric structuring and configuring of life more and more encounters the old lineal and fragmentary procedures and tools of analysis from the mechanical age, right? It's like the new stuff is a throwback, is what he's saying. More and more we turn from the content of messages to study total effect, right? So it's not what is said. It's more the effect of what is said, which involves how it's said. Right? Kenneth Boulding put this matter in the image by saying the meaning of a message is the change which it produces in the image. Right? This notion of effect, concern with effect rather than meaning. Right? How meaning would be how it sort of is negotiated by a particular person, right? And the kind of cognitions and mind of the person. But because you have like polyseming, multiple meanings, right? We're concerned more with effect, he's saying. All right, last sentence. Concern with effect rather than meaning is a basic change of our electric time. For effect involves the total situation and not a single level of information movement. All right, all of these test questions have been answered in color in each of the respective slides.